And I feel growing up with that, my perception is that that's normal, right? So then moved to South Africa, and then the influence crept in, and university in my early life, eating all the rubbish that everybody else was eating. But I think when I was eventually presented with this idea, like, hey, this is maybe not the best way to be eating, because of what I had grown up with and experienced, it totally made sense to me. It was much easier for me to believe that because that's how I grew up as a kid, you know. So I think from the food perspective, that made it much easier for me to accept and move forward with trying this keto diet that made such a big difference in my life, you know. And I wasn't even really sick compared to most people.
Welcome back to another episode of the Protecting Your Nest podcast, where we focus on the pillars of health that help us break free from chronic disease and metabolic dysfunction. I'm your host, Dr. Hampton, and today we're diving into a topic I know will resonate deeply with you. Have you ever wondered how an electrical engineer, yes, an engineer, ends up at the front line of metabolic health, leading the charge against chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes and dementia? Well, my guest today, Doug Reynolds, has lived that very transformation. He's the CEO of LowCarbUSA and president of the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, two powerhouse organizations dedicated to educating people on the benefits of therapeutic carb reduction. But Doug isn't just leading organizations, he's now an author. And with his new book, The Road to Metabolic Health, which was released this year, he shares a deeply personal yet highly practical guide that will not only tell his incredible journey from a childhood in Zimbabwe to pioneering low-carb education, but also provides a powerful insight to how you can take control of your own health. Doug, we have become friends. I appreciate all the work you're doing. I'm always privileged when you allow me to speak at your conferences, and I just want to welcome you to the podcast, my friend.
Oh, thanks, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And it's a pleasure to have you. A lot of times when you're on your journey in life, you don't realize how much you're achieving. And clearly, the work you're doing is having an impact. It's impacted my life. And we need people providing that impact, because doctors like myself would never know what I know about low carb, keto, and now carnivore. The people who watch us and follow us and obviously come to conferences would not know these things. So I just want to thank you again. And I do want to start our conversation, speaking a little bit about your electrical engineering background. I want you to take us back to the moment you first realized that metabolic health was not only important, but something you needed to dedicate your life to, particularly with your background as an engineer.
So, it kind of that, to answer that question, you kind of have to jump forward a little bit, because I didn't come to this realization that, metabolic health is really important, and that's what's been going wrong with me. So I need to do something about it. Stuff happened in order to make me realize that. I'd been introduced to it 6 months into it. I'd been really struggling as a runner, and a distance runner was kind of my thing. And I was really battling to run. I was putting on weight. Knees were sore. I was really struggling. And I got introduced to the concept of ketones being better than glucose as a source of fuel. I didn't even know what a ketone was,
Right.
And so we went through this whole metamorphosis and learned about it, and then dragged Pam to the store and sort of went and bought all this high fat meat and heavy cream and all that kind of stuff, and sort of embarked on this journey, And 6 months later, it was my birthday, and it was like a work all the work guys, we were at a like a restaurant bar place, and it had got to work to the point where we didn't talk about it anymore because they were so sick of hearing us talk about it and how amazing it was, But they didn't care. When they left, it was just Pam and myself left, in the restaurant, and then we started talking about it again, and my weight had come back down to what it used to be when I was in my 30s and running all these ultra distance races, and I was feeling fantastic. And I was saying to her, like, how is it that I was 52 or something at that stage? Like, how did I not even know about this stuff?
That's right.
I didn't even know what a ketone was 6 months ago.
That's right.
Really. And it just, I started pounding my fists and saying, like, we need to put 1,000 people in the room and put on a conference, because there were one or two, but they were little ones, 100, 150 people max. And I was like, San Diego, summer destination, we need to put 1,000 people in the room. And 10 years later, I'm still struggling to put 1,000 people in the room. It's
I know.
way more difficult than I ever imagined. But over the years, I mean, we were only going to put on one event. That was it. And now we were in Boca a couple of months ago, and it was number 23, I think.
Yeah,
And
that's crazy.
the 9th one there. And in August, when we go back to San Diego, that will be the 10th San Diego event that we've put on since we started this, and the 24th event in total. So, like you said, I mean, when it started, there was no way I had this vision of it turning into what we've got now. And the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners coming out of that to be this organization that supports and provides a home for practitioners that want to embrace this intervention. All of that has just evolved over time, And every year, it's like I do my opening talk at the event, and I kind of tell a little bit of the story about how I got into it, kind of go through what we've got at LowCarbUSA, and then SMHP came around, and almost always there's some new feature or something new that I can reveal at the end of my talk. And again, like now, I don't know what I'm going to tell people in August about what's new, but I'm certain that by the time we get to August, something else would have come up that we either have done or have thought about working on or something, because these ideas just keep popping up, and people constantly coming, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? A lot of the time it's meh, but every now and then we get a good suggestion, and then we run with it.
That's right.
So it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah, it's inspiring. I think for those who are watching us, we're just regular folk who have been positively impacted by what we put on our plate, and who knew it would be so life-changing. So if you're checking us out today and you have a vision or an idea, a vision without action is just a dream. And I like dreaming, but man, if you can wake up one day and say, man, I got something tangible, just like your book, I got something tangible that I can put in my hands, or I'm at a conference and I can say, man, look what we've been able to achieve. So, and if you take action, you'll create momentum, and your opportunities won't have to wait. They'll just happen. And who knows where you'll land, but you'll land somewhere further down the road that versus if you had not done anything. So
and further down the road than you could ever have expected.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's for sure.
Now, your experience has impacted you in a way that's profound, and you have your own personal experience. I have mine. But when you're at these conferences, has there ever been a moment when you either you heard a story or you talked to somebody during the conference where you was like, wow, this conference, what we've created here has really made a difference? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, there's so many different things that have been amazing, but I think the one situation that came up a few years ago is the one that stands out the most to me. Um, I don't know. You obviously are familiar with Dave Feldman, but he's another engineer like me who discovered this whole way that in a very short time, just by changing what he ate, he could manipulate his cholesterol. And he started to realize that, like, wait a minute, like if it's this, literally in a day, I can change it from really low to really high. How can that be a predictor of ongoing heart health? And so he came to our very first event, and it's almost like he just discovered this. And I always tell the story, like he had this little laptop in the crook of his arm, and he was going around and trying and showing people all these graphs that he had plotted of his responses, as he changed what he ate. And he was getting in my face about it, and it was my first event, and I was spinning like a top, like just trying to keep stuff on the rails, And it was like, Dave, like really, I can look at it afterwards, and no, look, he wouldn't let it go, and then the next year in San Diego, we gave him a chance to do a breakout talk, and the following year he was pretty on the main stage, and pretty much has been there ever since. And his talks get better and better, but in the meantime, he's actually launched this clinical. It's not a clinical trial, but it's a trial for people that like a phenotype that he came across that they call lean mass hyperresponders. Seems to be people that are relatively fit, very lean, and all their markers are perfect, but yet their LDL levels are way sky high.
That's right.
And so he did this research with, I think they got 100 people or something, and they did like a baseline thing. But you had to have baseline blood work from before you started on keto. So I was really bummed because I knew I'd had some done for insurance or whatever, but I couldn't find it.
That's right.
And so I could never be a part of his cohort. But he got these 100 people, and 2 years later, he's shown some amazing stuff. And now we saw the premiere of the movie that they've actually made about all this work that he's done. That's going to come out later this year.
Yeah, that's cool.
But he was hyping up about the fact that there was some special announcement he was going to make. And it turned out that things all came together that literally a week before our event, because everything had to be in place with the IRB and all sorts of stuff that's saying, okay, you're allowed to actually announce that this trial is going to happen. And so he made that announcement as part of his talk at our event. And Tony, you've been to some of my events as well, and I've often been called the mic Nazi for like the Q&A mic.
That's right.
Like I'm really strict about making sure people just ask a question, don't try and lecture themselves, and only ask one question, and all of that kind of stuff. And it's kind of, by the end of the 4 days, it's like a running joke almost.
That's right.
That I'm always chasing people away from the mic. But the end of this talk that Dave did came up, and he, who was it that came up first? I think Steve Finney was one of our other speakers there, and he came like sprinting up to the mic, and because he wanted to talk to Dave. And obviously with the speakers, I give them a bit more latitude and let them say a bit more than some of the other regular attendees. And then Eric Westman came up behind him, and And then the two of them were kind of standing kind of side by side and having a conversation with Dave on the stage, which like never happens,
Right.
you know.
Right. That's right.
And then Arthur Agatston was in the audience because he was also one of our speakers, like later in the weekend. And I know for people who don't know, he actually invented the calcium score, the calcium heart score.
That's right.
It's even called the Agatston score by a lot of people, right?
That's right.
So Eric then said, "Hey," like pointed to Arthur and said, "Like, don't you want to come up as well?"
Mm-hmm.
So the three of them came up, and then they're having this conversation, and like nobody else dared to come up and sort of say, "It's my turn to speak at the mic," you know. Right. And normally our Q&As are about for half an hour, and this went on literally for an hour at least into the lunch break. And at one point, Steve actually turned to the audience and said, like, I don't think you guys realize how incredible this is, because he says that at a lot of other medical conferences and stuff, like detractors and enemies and stuff, they come up to the mic and they attack the speaker, and it gets really ugly, you know. Whereas here, everybody just wanted to learn as much as possible. It was just the most amazing day. And then that evening, we have these dinners outside in the courtyard, and you know, everybody's there, the speakers are there, and it just happened to work out that I ended up back at the lift, at the elevators, at the same time as Steve Finney, sort of going back to our rooms. And we got in the elevator and the doors closed, and he looked at me and he said, "That was epic." He said, "Best day ever."
Wow.
And from someone like Steve, who's not necessarily very demonstrative, you know, I mean, that was amazing to hear. I mean, I already felt that, but then to hear him actually say that, and it wasn't like, "Hey, what did you think of today?" I didn't like prompt him or anything. He just came out with it, you know.
He just said it.
That whole day, right up to that last interaction, I think is cemented as the best day ever for me as well.
Wow. I love that. And I'm pretty amazed that even very smart people don't always have the knowledge to understand the impact of diet. And, you know, even I talked to a patient just yesterday, and we were talking about diabetes medicine, but the patient, when she had seen a specialist, just hadn't had any conversation around the impact of nutrition. So if we're talking about cholesterol, there was no discussion. It was never even a thought for the doctor to talk about diet. And when you think about your diet, is such a big lever to pull if you're trying to impact your cholesterol, because your liver, you know, is going to produce a ton of cholesterol and adjust, but the adjustment is based on what you're eating. So if you're eating a lot of cholesterol, then the liver says, I can just chill. If you're not making enough, it'll make more. And just to imagine that if you don't tell people that, then they're going to rely on medicine. And if you don't tell them that, oh, we're concerned about your triglycerides or your HDL, oh, by the way, there's a diet that's going to help those things. So I just think I'm just happy that Dave decided to pursue that. I'm more excited that, you know, our colleagues are excited about the work he's doing. And again, we have an engineer in the work you're doing, and we have an engineer in the work Dave's doing, and we have, you know, journalists like Nisha Taishos.
Yeah,
And
Ivor Cummins is an engineer as well, right? So,
exactly.
yeah.
So we
Gary
have
Taubes is a journalist.
He's a journalist,
Yeah.
exactly. We need people sometimes who are not living in a certain world to come into that world to provide a different perspective. And I think we have to value that perspective, and we have to use that perspective to say, I hadn't thought about that, tell me more.
Mm.
And then we work together. And I really am. And let me ask you this, your perspective from, upbringing in Zimbabwe and South Africa. Do you think those early experiences shaped your views on health food, even being resilient? Any of those things impacted you that way?
I've thought about that, and I mean, I feel like everything that I went through in my life basically positioned me to make that decision to go and start that first event. But I talk about it in the book a bit. It's like, especially growing up in Zimbabwe, was like, wow, when was it in the 60s that Ansel Keys came up with that whole thing and the whole American mindset about what's heart healthy, and that kind of
Right.
changed.
That's right.
But I think we left and moved down to South Africa when I was 14, and I think at that point it had not influenced us. So it was like milk from the farm, even when we were living in the city, right? That it came from dairy farms and stuff that were just out of town, and they literally trucked the stuff in and then went and bottled it and delivered it. It it I was trying to think about it this afternoon even, and I was like, there were so few restaurants even. There were no fast food restaurants. Nothing.
Zero.
And so it wasn't even an option for people. And I feel growing up with that, my perception is that that's normal, right? So then moved to South Africa, and then the influence crept in, and university in my early life, eating all the rubbish that everybody else was eating. But I think when I was eventually presented with this idea, like, hey, this is maybe not the best way to be eating, because of what I had grown up with and experienced, it totally made sense to me. It was much easier for me to believe that because that's how I grew up as a kid. So I think from the food perspective, that made it much easier for me to accept and move forward with trying this keto diet that made such a big difference in my life. And I wasn't even really sick, compared to most people. I'm pretty sure my A1C was probably up in the pre-diabetes type range, but I never had it tested, so I don't know.
Right. Okay.
But I put on the weight, my knees were really sore, little skin issues on my ears, and some respiratory problems and stuff like that. All of those things cleared up. But the one other thing that I feel like those early days, and I talk about like when I was a really small kid, I didn't even ask my parents or the farm that we were visiting. My dad used to be a farmer and come back into town, visiting friends of his on their farms. And I didn't ask him. I didn't ask my parents. I literally went down to there was one tractor that didn't do plowing and all of that, but it always had this trailer attached to it. And so it would take the workers out to the fields where they were going to be planting stuff or picking stuff or whatever, or it would be taking like these salt licks, big blocks, and they would load it up on the trailer, and we'd take it out to the fields where the cows were, and we would like drive along and dump some off along the way. And I literally walked up to the tractor driver and said, like, "Can I drive?" And so he showed me how to do it. And those old tractors look like with these like rounded like hubcaps. And he would sit on that hubcap, like hanging onto it with his hands like this.
Wow.
And let me drive. And I was about, I don't know, it's like not even 3 foot tall. I was tiny. I was small for my age as well, but I was driving this trailer around with a bunch of workers on behind it often. you know. And when the farmer found out about it, it wasn't like, oh, you need to stop doing that. My parents found out about it. They didn't say, oh, you need to stop doing that. It was like, okay, well, if the driver's okay with it, then if you're not doing a good job and he's scared, he's gonna put an end to this, right?
That's right.
And I give some examples of a few other things that like we used to do as kids, and that we weren't afraid to do stuff, and we weren't always thinking of the consequences, which is not necessarily a good thing, but I just don't think we were brought up to be afraid of doing something. If you wanted to do it, then go and do it. And I think that day that I woke up and said, like we'd been having this, I had this conversation with Pam the night before about how we needed to put on an event somewhere and help teach other people about this, like what we didn't know.
That's right.
And then so, I got up in the morning, and I don't even remember making a conscious decision about it. I literally got up and just started trying to find out, how do I get hold of these guys? I'd never been to a low-carb conference. I didn't know a single person in the space. And I looked up a few of the people that I'd got to realize were like the high profile ones that, through their YouTube videos and stuff like that, the few of them that were out at the time. And I would find a website and go get a contact us and say like, hey, I want to put on this conference in San Diego. Would you be interested? And I wrote to 3 or 4 people, and some of them came back to me, and the next minute, they agreed to do it.
That's right.
There's an amazing story I tell about Gary Taubes and how he interviewed me basically to find out. But by the end of the discussion, he felt confident enough that I knew enough to be able to put this event on. And so he said, okay, I'll come and speak. And that was the turning point. That moment when he decided to come to the party, that made, I looked at Pam, put the phone down, and said like, wow, like we better do something now. This is real. So yeah, I tell stories about the dramas of putting on that first one, and how we ever got to be standing in there watching that first speaker go up. I have no idea. But going after that and ending up with like literally no money and getting an eviction notice on the door at our apartment, but still not thinking, okay, well, I better go back to being an engineer and earning some decent money again. That never even occurred to me. It was just like, okay, so what do I have to do to fix this, or to be able to keep moving forward, And so I found ways, and I feel like that characteristic, or that character, was a result of how I grew up, I think. So.
Wow, that's impressive. I don't think the average person fully understands what it takes to run a conference. I don't think yeah. So I'm just, again, sometimes it's good that you don't know either, because sometimes if you get into something and every detail,
I've said in that book, I said, if I knew ahead of time what this was going to entail,
that's right,
I would never have started it.
Wouldn't have signed
because
up.
Then I would have been too afraid.
That's right, exactly.
So ignorance was bliss almost, in a way.
That's right.
I just so the previous job that we were working on, or working at, Pam and I both, one of the things that we did was put on these big conferences. And So we thought we knew what we were doing as far as putting on a conference goes. But what I didn't know was all the contractual stuff and all of the shenanigans that go on, and to get to a point where you sign a contract with the hotel. I didn't even know that I must have known that there must have been some kind of contract, but I had no idea what it entailed and financially what the cost was.
That's right.
And so we were just responsible for putting on, for the logistics, basically. For now, okay, so now the conference is on, like how big the room needs to be, how many people, how many seats we want, what order the speakers are going to come in, that sort of stuff, which I thought I was the bee's knees and I knew everything. And I realized afterwards that I knew nothing. And that was like the smallest, littlest part of the whole thing. And yeah, it was it was pretty scary that when we first started to be presented with these contracts, and then again I had these 1,000 people in my head, right? So I'm thinking 1,000 times so much money. Yeah, we can afford that.
Right.
Right. Not realizing that we're never going to put 1,000 people in the room. In the end, we got 350, and that was a big deal. It was like bigger than anything else that had been in that space at the time. And we literally did it from zero to putting it on in 6 months. So
that's a lot.
It's incredible. Like we didn't have a website. We didn't have any kind of social media presence. We had nothing. And yet we started building it, and people started to come, and we even got to, I still need to find her one day. I want to try and give her a free ticket to come to another event, because I don't think she's been back. But we built the website, and then it was all in draft form, but then eventually we had to publish it in order to be able to test it properly. But we weren't even speaking about it. We didn't promote it or anything. And while we were still busy testing it, suddenly this ticket sale came in. Somebody had come across this website and bought a ticket for the event. And we were still like, no, wait a minute. Like, we're still trying to test this thing. And then, we went and I checked the bank and all of that stuff, and the money actually made it there. So it was, in the end, it was actually quite a good test, because it showed the whole process, the whole, beginning to end actually worked.
Okay.
And we got the money. The money went into the right account and everything. So,
that's right.
So that was kind of funny. And the minute we did start promoting it, like, ticket sales went really well. Like we had no idea if anybody was going to come.
Right. That's right.
And we put it out there, and people started signing up. And so, yeah, we got to 350 by the time the event came.
That's amazing.
But a lot of drama financially along the way. So,
Yeah, it just sounds you're kind of flying at the seat of your pants, but it just kind of, it all worked out. And so you have Low Carb USA, you have the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, and you also have a Journal of Metabolic Health. So maybe you can summarize how these three entities kind of work. What's the difference? Like, if a person just saw you in the elevator, what would you say the purpose of each was?
Yeah, so I've even done a couple of talks where I had these cartoon characters on my slides wearing different hats,
right,
and saying, "This is me with my Low Carb USA hat," and then over here it's me with my SMHP hat on it, and constantly trying to describe to people what the difference is. And I've kind of given up doing that now. I mean, really, Low Carb USA, we had the clinical guidelines there. We had this professional environment that we were trying to develop. But then we established the SMHP, which was the real place for that. So we moved the guidelines over, the membership and the interaction with the practitioners and all of that all happens on the SMHP side now. And LowCarbUSA predominantly provides training.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the symposiums that we do are put on by LowCarbUSA. We've got the infrastructure and everything to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, I think what's also muddied the waters is like if you look if you go to an event page, it says an SMHP event hosted by LowCarbUSA.
Right.
And so everybody's confused.
That's right.
So at the end of the day, what I really, and then a short elevator pitch would just be that we're kind of part of this. It's like a company.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the same people doing every job in a company. Like there's different departments. There's the finance department and the engineering department and the sales department, right? And so the SMHP is like the holding company, and LowCarbUSA is just a department that puts on, because it's the same people, it's the same goals. One's a nonprofit and one's not, and then there's advantages to both in different situations. And so whether we'll combine everything into one organization eventually, I don't know. Mm-hmm. We would have to get to a point where the tax benefits of having a for-profit entity to do some things may help. The thing with the nonprofit is that it's only a nonprofit if the revenues that you earn are in line with and commensurate with your mission statement, right? So, for instance, like Dry Farm Wines is at all our events, and we have an affiliate arrangement with them, and they, we drive a lot of sales to them, and so we generate a revenue stream from them that helps keep us going.
That's right.
But if we had to combine the two companies now we wouldn't be able to be earning that revenue under the nonprofit banner, because it's selling low carb wine is going to be very difficult to justify to the tax man.
Right.
So there's one example of why they probably will remain separate.
Cool.
But again, it's like just a department of the same organization. So.
Right. Okay. If I were to, pick up your book, and I'm curious about your story, what would you say to a person? I guess we're on the elevator again, and you're saying, "Okay, I heard you wrote a book, Doug.
What's it about?"
Yeah. Right. What would they expect to get from reading that book? What would you say to them?
So, yeah, I should probably come up with a good elevator pitch, right? But it's basically follows me from when I was born, basically, and so so maybe go back and say, okay, so we have created these organizations that help educate and teach people and like practitioners and patients about the benefits of lifestyle interventions. Like it's not just the diet, right? There's often a lot more to it. And over the years of developing those, I've always had to think about how it is that as a software engineer, I ended up doing this. And that got me thinking to what happened to me in my life and what might have molded me into the kind of person that decided to go ahead and do this down the road. And so it's a story of my early life and what experiences I went through that positioned me to create and start running these to someone described it today, even I think as a metabolic health movement that we've kind of put together.
Yeah, I love that. You're, some of what we hear in the world impacts whether or not we're gonna take action, right? And I know that many people struggle to take action. So if you were to continue to you keep meeting these people in the elevator. I'm not sure why you stay in the elevator.
Yeah,
You know,
no, Steve
yeah,
Finney included in that, right?
that's right. That's right. So you meet somebody, and I'll be honest. Sometimes we're at a point where you can kind of look at somebody and know they're struggling, right?
Mm.
Um, and and maybe they're intuitive enough to know they're struggling as well, and they want to achieve metabolic health. But what do you tell a person? What should be their first step to take to walk towards that metabolic health we're all trying to achieve?
I think so often we try and say, "Oh yeah, so you need to try the keto diet," and
Right.
try and start explaining that to them. And I don't, I haven't been that successful very often in that situation like that. Unless the person's already kind of knows what you do and comes and asks
Right.
about it, then they're a bit receptive, right? Um, but if they don't know anything about it, I feel like what we provide with LowCarbUSA and the SMHP now is some incredible information.
Mm-hmm.
The resources there for patients and practitioners, and the training and the videos, a whole bunch of free videos that are available, and some that you need to be a member of the SMHP to get access to. I feel like it would be better to encourage them and send them to a place where they know they can trust the source of the information, right? Because there is so much garbage out there now. 10 years ago, when I first started this, it wasn't like that.
Mm.
You search for keto or something like that, and you got Steve Finney and Jeff Folek and all those kinds of people. Those are the ones that came up, and
Mm-hmm.
then you would watch their videos and learn about it. Right now, you search for keto or metabolic health or something like that and with all these AI engines that are all biased. They've been programmed
Mm-hmm.
to return the party line.
Mm.
And I remember I was trying to do. Somebody asked me a question. It was about LDL or something, and so it was something that my knowledge wasn't quite up with, that I needed
Mm-hmm.
to check something out basically, and I'd started doing searches, and just like mountains of garbage came back,
Wow.
and as that started to change, I was now familiar with all the people were knowledgeable, right? So then I would go and pick out the articles or the videos or whatever from the people that I knew. Oh yeah, that guy knows what he's talking about, or that lady knows what she's talking about, and then I would go and read that.
Right.
But nowadays, you literally can't find anything. It
Right.
is very difficult to find some decent information about the ketogenic diet or carbohydrate reduction,
Yeah.
or lifestyle interventions of any kind.
That's right.
And
Wow.
so I would tell them that, like saying, look, like literally, my advice is don't Google it.
Mm-hmm.
For the first time about anything, you say don't Google it, because you're going to go down the wrong path,
That's right. Yeah.
But here are two organizations that you can trust 100%.
That's right.
All
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
go there, go around the website, watch the free videos, read some of the articles, and learn about it, what it is, and then maybe come back to me when you have some questions, and I can help you.
That's right.
To understand some of the things that you maybe couldn't understand from what you were reading and stuff.
That's right. And it's even worse because the technology, and I love a lot of things about AI. I mean, my notes in the clinic are written by AI these days, so
Right.
it saves me a lot of time. But if I ask AI a question and I frame it, what's the harm caused by a high-fat diet? It'll give me that. If I say, what's the benefit of a high-fat diet? It'll give me that. So it's like, it's basically, it gives you what you want it to give you. And obviously the lens that it uses is based on people who fear fat and people who don't fear fat. So
Right.
I think that is the problem. It doesn't really, you can't trust it to say what's truly the best diet, and is that going to just come up in a way where there's science to support it, and so that's one of the flaws of it. And again, you have to align it with resources. Now, the good thing about AI is you say, hey, I want to hear the benefits of a high-fat diet through the lens of, and then you put maybe a Finney or a Verta Health.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. So if you know how to phrase the
That's
question,
right. Exactly.
then you can get.
Then you can get it.
And that's true. I didn't think about trying to phrase the. I'd asked a general thing,
That's
right?
right.
And I
That's right.
didn't try and narrow it down like you've
That's
just
right. You'd
described.
almost have to,
But
yeah.
a new person is never going to know how to
They're
ask
in
that
trouble, and
question,
the
right?
problem is most people we live in the Twilight Zone, the matrix, the low-carb, keto, carnivore matrix. So, I spoke at South Suburban College, which is in the South Suburb just south of Chicago, this past weekend, and you had, very smart people in the audience, a couple of doctors, educators, etc. And when I spoke to this crowd of about 20 people, um, my statements were all news to them,
Well,
and they were very engaged and very open to hearing the message, but it was like hearing it for the first time.
yeah.
So we live in a bubble where we not only understand a lot of what we're talking about, but we can at times get into the weeds and start talking about mitochondria and stuff. and that's why even on my YouTube channel, I try to keep it a little higher level because, going back to, smarter than a fifth grader, I want to make sure a fifth grader understands it. And I'm not speaking to the PhDs necessarily who
Correct.
know this. I'm talking to the person who may have not even heard the term metabolic health, or
Right.
barely knows what a carbohydrate. Most people have no clue that a carbohydrate, by definition, defines fruits and vegetables. They just think starch.
Yeah.
That's all
And I
they know.
mean, even chefs, right? So
Right.
we have these low carb dinners at all our events.
That's right.
And so we have to sit and work with the chef on a menu.
That's right.
And so you'll give them a list of this is what it mustn't have carbs and blah blah blah.
Right. That's
and
right.
they'll give you back this sample menu.
Right.
And it's like, dude.
Right.
but they genuinely don't know
They just don't
that
know.
these things are packed with sugar and carbs.
They have no idea. And my patients literally come to me and say, "Doc, I'm doing a low carb. I'm doing it." Now they don't say low carb, they say I'm doing a zero carb diet. I said, "Oh, so you're a carnivore." And they're like, "Well, what's a carnivore?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, you're eating zero carbs." And what they associate that with things like starchy food. And they have no idea that grains are still carbohydrates. It just blows my mind. So I'm
Yeah.
constantly educating. I did that today because I have an obesity clinic at the day that we recorded this. So so I think what's good about that is that we'll never be bored with, we'll never live in a world where we won't need a conference that you helped to put together with you and your lovely partner in crime, Pam. We'll
Yeah.
never live in a world where we don't need to be inspired by books like yours. We'll never live in a world where we won't have classes to teach people, or we don't have podcasts like this or YouTube channels to help spread this message, because we have so many more people to reach. And that's
Yeah.
why, again, I respect the work you're doing, because we're only scratching the surface. I think the only thing I would comment on, and this for a couple of reasons, can we get to the point, like when I do a YouTube video, most of my viewers are new to my channel, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least 70-80%. But
Every time you,
when I put a video out there, see, I thought when I actually was able to grow the channel a little bit more recently. So let me so how do you grow a YouTube channel? You go watch a YouTube video that teaches you how to grow the channel. So I started watching videos, right? And it's really a conundrum. But what I learned, like if I go to that conference and I talk to those 20 or 30 people, right?
yeah,
And everybody at the conference is engaged and says, "I'm going to follow you, Dr. Hampton."
yeah,
That's great, but what really creates growth is having YouTube notice that you exist,
right,
so that, all this optimization stuff. But so it's really just trying to figure out, because it's important that we get in front of people. But
right,
what I'm saying is there are some brilliant people who may even have a small channel who never are heard.
get heard, yeah,
So you have to figure out, well, how do I get people to be heard? So what I did when I kind of grew from 30,000 subscribers to almost 80 now in like 4 months,
wow,
people, they may not have the bandwidth to hear this conversation. It just may be too long for them. Now, some
right,
people will, from the moment we started talking to when it ends, but there are also people who need a 5-minute quick video.
yeah,
I think so. I think in order for us to have impact, going back to Low Carb USA, the conferences, is we're going to have to work overtime. And I know I'm going to be doing that, particularly as I try to reach communities of color. And as we try to reach people who never heard this message, we have to continue to figure out, well, how do we reach people who have never heard this message? Because we do have a crowd that sometimes we're preaching to the choir. And we have to, so we're going to always struggle with that, because, and it's not just how do we engage them to come? How do we make it where they can come? I mean, on the south side of Chicago, man, it's like, I think everybody should have a coach. Everybody should have a coach to help them along their way. But how do we make coaching affordable for everybody?
right,
So we're
yeah.
always so I think we just have to keep thinking, what do people need? And how do we then create an
How do we
environment?
reach them better? Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to
No,
keep
and
doing
that's a good point. Pam and I have been speaking about it a lot recently. Is like, what else can we do? And this whole thing of shorts is, I think, for now, and it'll probably evolve again. And then
Oh,
by
of
the
course.
time we start doing it, it's going to evolve onto something else.
Right.
but
Yeah.
but putting the shorts seems to be the thing that gets
Yeah.
a lot more people to look at, because they know it's only going to be a minute or two, or a
Right.
couple of minutes,
And
and
they'll tolerate that, right?
right,
Yeah.
and so it's going to be the people that are already starting to think, I really want to do this,
That's right.
who are going to still be listening to us talking here now.
That's right.
The new people we've lost them long ago, I think.
Right. That's right. No doubt.
Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate that. So I think for me, I think that storytelling will help people at least hear the journey of others. My hope is that the book that you put out there, and I'm going to encourage everybody checking us out to check it out, because I remember stories. One of the things I like about Dr. Boz, for example, is that she's a storyteller. So if you're always telling stories, those tend to stick better
Yeah,
than
that's why she's so popular, right?
exactly. She
Yeah,
knows how to tell stories. She's amazing. So
yeah,
So I just think that I'm happy that you told your story, and you have a place where people can get that story while we're benefiting from all the work you guys are doing. So
Yeah.
I just want to show appreciation for that. And
Yeah. Thanks. It just reminded me to say though that there's an entire chapter on here that pretty much Sarah Rice wrote um, about the benefits of the ketogenic diet, like everything else. How
nice.
low-carb-USA came
Right,
about,
right,
and
right,
then a
right.
little bit about what the SMHP does and all of
That's
that.
right.
But there's that one big chapter in there that is the stuff. It's pretty much the only stuff that's got references in that in the
That's cool. That's
in the
cool.
book. But some really good, fairly basic. If you're talking about like easily understandable information about the benefits of the ketogenic diet, and debunking a couple of
Yeah.
the concerns or the myths about it as well.
Right.
So there is good information about the lifestyle in there as well as
That's good.
surrounded by the story and what these organizations actually are able to provide for them.
That's excellent. Well, thank you for having that in there because, I find that when my audience is not like if I'm a guest on Carrie of Homestead How YouTube channel or the Steak and Butter Gal Bell. If I'm a guest on their platforms, they tend to have an audience that's fairly sophisticated. But even on those platforms, like I just recorded something recently with Carrie of Homestead How, who's working on a carnivore documentary. The questions he asked were still those most obvious questions. What about saturated fat?
Right.
What about cancer? What
Because
about
he knows that there's
yeah,
still people that need to hear that,
they're
right?
still and some of those when I said I went from 30 to 80 or so subscribers, that's a lot of new people, some of whom don't have any of that knowledge. So you
Any
got to
idea? Yeah.
keep putting it out there. So now when it comes to you, trying to stay on the planet as long as possible and increasing not just your lifespan, but your health span.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about how you're going to protect your nest, is there areas you plan to focus on over the next 12 months? Any parts of your life that you plan to focus on to make sure Doug is still here for many years to come?
I feel like we kind of got it down as far as the nutrition and the diet
That's right.
goes.
That's right.
But I think looking after myself stress wise is what I need to work on. The last 8 months, we went to represent the SMHP at the PHC conference in London in May last year. And then it went on 2 brand new websites that dragged on through the whole year. The San Diego event in August. We had a brand new event in Brainerd Lakes in like October. Then the Boca event in January. And in that time, between Brainerd Lakes and Boca, I actually wrote the book as well.
Oh, wow.
It was chaos. And so when we got and then we came back from Boca, and like a week later, we had to go to to Dave Feldman's COSI meeting and
Right.
watch the
That's
premiere
amazing.
of that movie that they've made about all the research that he's doing. Um, and then I came back, and then I had to go back to have a meeting with the Bazukis. The Bazuki Foundation is formed by the Bazuki family, who come from the Roblox gaming business. Their son had a lot of mental health problems, and they finally found the low carb diet and basically reversed all his conditions, and he's back functioning as he's back at home. And he was on the streets at one stage. So they've decided, okay, this is it. They're going to put their might behind initially it was just behind mental health. But
Hmm.
they've come to realize that there's so much more to it than just mental health, and they're taking on the whole metabolic health thing in their efforts. So I was invited to participate in a strategy meeting with them for that, and I went back via Vegas to do a podcast interview with Dave Feldman. So when I got back from that, it was like, okay,
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
like 5 months or so until I'm not going anywhere.
That's right.
I'm staying at home.
That's
I'm doing
right.
my stuff, cleaning my garage, go and do some of the stuff that I get back playing the guitar again, maybe get out and even run a bit more.
That's right.
And do the stuff that I enjoy doing
That's right.
outside of work.
That's right.
Because literally for 9 months now, I haven't.
Yeah.
I haven't done that at all, and I really need to.
Critically important. I was just talking to my lovely wife, Karan, who you know, and we were even thinking beyond my current life as a doctor, a leader, and some of the social media stuff. And we're trying to think through, how do we even think about the future in a way that this doesn't become, I want my YouTube life, the other stuff I do, to be more fun. So in order to do that, you have to be real careful not to turn it into too much of a job. So that's part of what we're going to be doing to keep our stress down, and also to make sure the marriage is first. So I do want to thank you for giving me a little bit of your time. So in terms of getting a copy of the book, is it all Amazon, or is there any other?
Yeah, we may find some other publishing platform at the moment, but the organization that helped me write this book, actually, I'll give them a plug. They're called Game Changer Publishing.
Nice.
And they have an upfront fee to help you write the book, but right from the beginning of getting an outline done to editing it and promoting it and getting it out there and printing everything.
Nice.
And they were incredible. So yeah, I can't remember why I was telling you that, but
well, I will say this. You're busy, so I'm just happy you had that type of support to, kind of guide you through the process.
Yeah, I mean, we literally, it was 60 days from the time we started, then the day I started, until we submitted it to Amazon for because it's like a month that they go through and check it out and everything before it actually goes live.
That's crazy.
And we wanted to go live before the Boca event. Like, we actually had the launch a couple of days before. We were already in Boca. Like, we set up in a conference room there.
That's right.
And that was where I was going. It was about Amazon. So basically, something that I learned in the process of doing this is that a lot of times, people give out links to where you can go on Amazon to get the book, but that if people search for it, it actually helps you a lot more. So we asked people to go and look for Doug Reynolds, the Road to Metabolic Health. Do a search on Amazon for that, and that way you'll find it very easily.
Oh, okay, cool.
But the continuous searches helps us as well.
That's good.
And that the whole point of writing this really was another idea of trying to get out beyond our bubble, right? Yes, all our friends and family basically bought the book on that first day,
right?
But now it's out there and people are hearing about it that wouldn't necessarily have known about us before.
That's right.
And so it's an interesting story in there as well, which hopefully keeps people more engaged, and we build into how LowCarbUSA came about. And so by the end of it, it's like, if you've got to the end, then it's obviously resonated with you. So here's a thing to scan to take you, and we've built a page on the SMHP site. Nice. It has all the best resources and stuff that people can go and learn more about this and decide how and what, if and how they want to engage in this. So
that's excellent. Well, I just searched it so I could do my portion, and I appreciate that. So thank you so much. We'll share the links for the book, and then through the book, all your other resources will be linked. So I think that's a good path to take. So thank you, Doug,
I
for
appreciate that, man.
your
Thanks.
time.
Yeah.
And it's been a great conversation, guys. We have learned a little bit about Doug's journey, and it does take resilience to help others and to stay on purpose and target. So who knew that an engineer would get us to this global movement in metabolic health? So definitely check out The Road to Health. I think it's a must read for anybody who wants to understand not only why metabolic health matters, but how they can take charge of their own health and well-being. So check that out. This opportunity to be in front of you guys is a privilege for me. I've enjoyed hosting this podcast. I enjoy making videos for YouTube, and I enjoy the privilege of speaking at conferences like the ones that Doug puts together. So I will continue to do that. This is my life purpose, which is why I call myself the Metabolic Health Doc. And I just thank you for checking us out, because clearly you care about your own health because you're here. So thank you again for coming to this episode of the Protecting Your Nest podcast. And until we meet again, continue to be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest.